All right, our next questions come from our friend Thomas. Thomas has 3 questions. The first one is, hey, coach, am I too old to... No. No, I don't care what number comes after that age. You are not too old to train. Get out there and train. I don't care if you're 14, 40, or 4,000. Get out there and train. As long as you're alive, you can train. And if that number is a teenage number, and you're wondering if you're too old and crusty to become a fighter, no. That's a baby. You got plenty of time to learn everything. Okay, next question. Thomas wants to know, he says, there are guys who can beat me in a fair fight. I have wondered whether other fighters face the same, especially these who do this primarily in their... Okay, I think I skipped part of this question. Thomas says, I have an insecurity and a fear over the fact that there are guys who can beat me in a fair fight. Okay, and he wonders whether other fighters have the same. And his next question is very similar to this one. He says, I also wanted to know how people who dedicate their lives to fighting deal with the fact that they can be beaten by others. Do you remember that scene in The Karate Kid, Part 1, where Daniel LaRusso is talking to Mr. Miyagi about how he is being bullied by the Cobra Kai jerks? And Mr. Miyagi mentioned that back in Okinawa when he was young, he also got bullied and beaten up. And this shocks Daniel LaRusso. He's like, but Mr. Miyagi, you knew karate. To which Mr. Miyagi responds, someone always knows more. And should that make you afraid and frightened that you are not the biggest fish in the pond? That you're not the strongest man in the world? That you're not the fastest dude on the planet? Because if you live a life like that, you will live in constant fear. Every single person on this planet has something to teach you. The sooner you recognize that, the better. Even the dumbest, slowest, weakest, most inept person on this planet, from your perception, has a valuable lesson to teach you. In some way, they are your better. In some way, they are your superior. Don't be afraid of that. Embrace that. Why? Because that's when you learn to be better yourself. And that is especially true of martial arts. When I find somebody, a martial artist, who is better than me at something, I get really excited because I realize, hey, this is something I can learn. This is something I can add to my game. This is something real. If you ever feel like you're the best in the world, you are deluded, especially as far as fighting is concerned. Because fighting, especially mixed martial arts, the more variables they are, the more it is like a big game of rock, paper, scissors. Which is the best in rock, paper, scissors? Is it rock? Is it scissors? Is it paper? That's a weird question, because each one of those has the possibility to beat one of the others. And when you play a complex game of rock, paper, scissors with many simultaneous variables, then it gets really, really interesting. Then it becomes a game of who manages the most variables the best at the appropriate times. And that's what a fight is. So how do you deal with this fear, with this anxiety of people being better? You know, when I started coaching, I would sometimes feel something like this. When I was invited to visit another gym, I would feel like I had to overperform if there was any sparring, if there was any skill demonstration. I felt like I needed to show I was the man. I have a right to be a coach. I have a right to teach. And so I can't possibly let anybody see weakness. And that's an understandable attitude, but it didn't get me very far. It got me far into a hole, but not very far as a martial artist, not very far as a coach, not very far as a fighter. And I remember sometime later, when I was still in this little me funk, I saw this video of two high-level jiu-jitsu black belts that I respected greatly. And they had different schools, they had different methodologies, but they were comparing notes. They rolled a little bit with each other, and then they would stop and say, hey, I notice you're doing it this way. I do it this way. Why do you do it that way? And they would compare notes. There was a lot of back and forth, and there was this beautiful synthesis of instruction and learning and technique and greatness that happened because of that, because they were willing to open up and share. And I thought, wow, I want that. That's the kind of coach I want to be. I don't want to be the coach that's living in fear like, oh, I hope nobody realizes I'm not the best guy in the room at all times. You know what the actual best guy in the room does? He pays attention and he learns something. He learns something from everybody. Make sure you're doing that. Next question.